All right, everybody, welcome back to Horn Takes, episode 34. We're going to talk about Texas baseball team, Texas basketball team, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the involvement of Texas in the demise of the Southwest Conference and the Big 12. Before we get into all that, a little bit of 2024 recruiting news. There's this new thing, for those of you that don't know about recruiting, called crystal balls, and it's basically just, hey, man, I think this recruit's going there. Texas got a couple of crystal ball picks for a couple of really highly recruited guys in the 2024 class. Jarrett Gibson, number one running back in the country out of Florida. He has been crystal balled to the University of Texas. And all that really means is recruiting analysts. And these guys, they talk to all these recruits. They follow them to camps and games and all kinds of good stuff like that. And over the years, they form relationships with these guys. And so basically when one of these recruiting analysts crystal balls one of these guys to a certain school, what they're saying really is, I feel right now that they're the school to beat in this recruitment. So Jarrett Gibson, that would be a huge win for the University of Texas. That would be 2 recruiting classes in a row with the number one running back in the country, and both of those guys out of the state of Florida. So Steve Sarkisian and staff are already doing a really good job in recruiting, and they're doing a good job nationally. And I think, they want to recruit in Texas, probably first and foremost, but they're also not afraid to go out of state and battle with some of the other big programs for some of these really highly touted national guys. So Jarrett Gibson, again, it's a crystal ball. We're a long way away from National Signing Day. We're a long way away from the early signing period. Tons of stuff can change. But that's obviously good news if you're a Texas fan. The other one was Micah Hudson. He's a 5-star wide receiver out of the state of Texas. He is the second-ranked wide receiver in the country at this point. Really fast guy, really, he's 6 foot, 186 pound, 190 pound type guy. Definitely in the mold of the type of wide receivers that Steve Sarkisian has been able to utilize to be successful in his system. So there it is, just real quick. Those are 2 guys that if they can get commitments from, might start a snowball effect for the 2024 class. So, we all kind of saw what all the news about Arch Manning did last year. We saw Texas really finish strong. And I think part of that is, I think towards the end of the recruiting cycle, where a lot of these guys end up probably has a lot to do with who's there, at least in part. All right, Texas baseball, we've talked about them before. If you're expecting great things from this University of Texas baseball team this year, you're probably going to be disappointed. They lost a lot of guys. The season has not started out well for them. They did, however, come back home and take 2 of 3 from Indiana this last weekend. The pitching looked really good over the course of the weekend for the most part. The bats are just really bad right now. And in that third game, they really should have won. They had an absolute just meltdown on the bases. There was a couple of years ago when Texas was kind of bad on the bases. It might have been last year. It was in the last couple of seasons that Texas kind of fell asleep at the wheel a lot, running bases. I don't know if that's like a David Pierce thing. I don't know what about his way of running or calling signs, or there's something there. I don't know exactly what it is, but we've seen basically 2 different David Pierce teams. And it's really early this year, don't get me wrong. But we've seen it where David Pierce teams in completely different lineups can kind of struggle in the running game. So I don't know what that was about, but they did. They got thrown out 2 or 3 times on the bases against Indiana in that third game. They come back Tuesday night against LSU, number 1 team in the country. Absolutely loaded lineup for LSU. And the pitching staff, again, really good. And it all started with LBJ, LeBaron Johnson Jr. He had a really great outing against LSU. 5 innings, 3 hits, 9 Ks to just 2 walks and 0 runs allowed. We talked about him a little bit last podcast. That dude, man, he has got some serious stuff. If he can get ahead of you on first pitch strikes with that fastball, you're in trouble as a hitter. You're in a tough spot because he was juicing it up to 97, 98 miles an hour against LSU. And then he's got an 88, 89 mile an hour slider. His off-speed stuff is just filthy. And if just outside of the pitches itself, if you think about, you just got 97 miles blasted by you. You just had 97 miles per hour thrown right by you. And then he throws a pitch that starts in the same spot and the bottom just drops out of it and it fades away from you. Oh, and by the way, that pitch is going 88, 89 miles an hour. So he's got like power off-speed stuff. A lot like, and I'm not comparing him to Randy Johnson, just the same type of guy where the fastball is dominating. And then, he's not throwing a lot of loopy off-speed stuff. His off-speed stuff is meant to look fast. It's meant to look like it's the same pitch you just saw, but it just moves away from you at the last second. So he did awesome. I'm really excited about him. I feel like he could probably crack his way into the weekend lineup if he keeps pitching like that. The guys have struggled a little bit on the weekends, especially when you're talking about the Saturday and the Sunday starters. So I think there's a huge opportunity for LBJ to get into that rotation. The bullpen in this game, surprisingly really good outside of one pitch. Duplantier made a mistake, got one up, and I believe it's Duggan, leadoff guy for LSU, took him deep. But other than that, they pitched a really good game. The problem, they hit 137 in this game. So if you're a Texas fan, you got to be kind of excited that the pitching looks better. The pitching looks better than you probably expected it to look. That's a positive. But the hitting looks way worse than you actually expected it to look, even knowing that the hitting was probably not going to be as good this year. So, I mean, you looked at last year was a historic offense. You lost 2/3 of it. You knew you weren't going to be as good. But I think they've taken not as good to an even greater level of not as good than most of us even expected. So, sitting at 3-5 right now. They got to go on the road to Cal State Fullerton this weekend. Those games will be on ESPN Plus. For me, I never had high expectations for this team, so I'm watching the team. What I really want to see from this team is what they look like towards the end of the season versus what they look like today. I don't expect that that's going to be tournament dominating type team. Like, I'm not saying it can't happen, but I don't expect this team to have grown up that much over the course of a season. And right now, this team, to me, really kind of resembles the 2019 team for Texas that went 500. So again, I think that team really struggled at the plate. This team has started out really struggling at the plate. If they can get the bats going, I mean, they got a chance to be pretty good because, again, right now the pitching is doing pretty well. So we'll see. We'll see what they do. I don't know a lot about Cal State Fullerton early in the season, obviously. I don't even know what their record is. I know they're probably not the Cal State Fullerton teams of old that were really powerful teams, really good teams. So who knows? We'll see. Texas basketball. So we talked the last time. We've talked a couple times about how they kind of control their own destiny in the Big 12 to win the Big 12 regular season title. We've broke it down. They need to win this many out of this many games. Da-da-da-da-da-da. They go on the road against Baylor, and I didn't get to see this game last weekend. I was at my we were doing baseball. That's what we do in the spring. We watch our son play baseball, but They went and dropped that game on the road. To me, just looking at the stats, and I haven't seen any. All I've done is look at the stats. I didn't hear any of the game. I didn't see any of the game. I haven't looked at any highlights of the game. What I feel like just by looking at the stats is, kind of what we've talked about before. This team goes by how the guard play is, and the guard play in that game, if you look at it statistically, not very good. We talked earlier in the season about this Texas backcourt, being the type of backcourt that can be elite. And for a while they played like that. And just down the stretch here, they just have not done that. And you can't, you look at the teams that run deep into the tournament, backcourt is a big deal. Usually the teams that win the national championship in basketball, they get really good guard play. And right now Texas is not getting good guard play. So then they're in a situation where there's 2 games left. They really need to win both of those games, at least one of them, to have a chance to tie. They really need to win both of them, and they drop a close road game against TCU. And this game just, to me, and I did get to watch this one last night, it was just bad. They got out-rebounded 43-28 in this game. Texas doesn't really have what I would call a big man. Their tallest player, I want to say, is 6'9", maybe 6'10", and that's tall. But they don't have any guys that are like just dominant physical type guys down low. Really, their longest player is Dylan Mitchell, and he's a freshman, and this ain't his fault. He's just not strong enough to play down there with those guys. He's super athletic. He's going to get you a dunk every once in a while. But he's not the type of guy you can read. He blocks shots really well, but he's not the type of guy that is going to body somebody up and stop him down low. He's not the type of guy that's going to just power his way under the basket and get up and make score the basketball that way. He's got a lot of growing to do. I know he's talented, but again, he's the tallest player and the longest player for Texas, and he's not ready to take on that role. Dylan Dessou, I don't feel like is strong enough. Christian Bishop is strong enough, but probably just not consistent enough to be that type of player. But they got their ass kicked handily on the glass last night. At one point, it was 18-2 rebounds for and against. Just like they just didn't look like they even gave a damn. The difference in this game with TCU, again, it was obviously way too many second chance possessions. The interesting thing is Texas gets it close late, and they fail to get a rebound. They make a stop. They force a bad shot. They cannot get the rebound, and then they end up fouling, I think, and that's when TCU took it to 5 points. Very next possession for Texas. In the last possession of the game, they hit a 3 to get within 2, but you can't let a team just have chance after chance after chance, especially when you make a decent stop on defense. When you do the things you need to do to force a bad shot, the shot doesn't fall. You got to be better at getting rebounds. And then there was just absolutely way too many points in the paint. And that wasn't necessarily on the Texas bigs. The guard play defensively, in the first half, it seemed like they're just letting them run right past them for easy buckets in the paint. There's not a lot of help going on underneath the basket. When the help did come, nobody helped the help, and so there was guys wide open for easy layups and dunks for TCU. Again, the guard play, not just defensively but offensively, was just not good. It's just not good enough to win games in the Big 12. And it's not going to be good enough to win games in the tournament either. So now you're looking at Texas. They've dropped 4 of their last 7 games. KU's coming to town on Saturday. Texas has to win this game to even think about forcing a tie for the Big 12 regular season title. And I think at this point for Texas, you really need to win this game probably for your seeding. For a long time, everybody's been talking about Texas as a 2 seed. And there really was no discussion about it. Texas is a 2 seed. Well, I think if you look at the record over the last 7 games, This game against KU is pivotal. The good news is it's at home. The bad news is over the last 7 games, this team just does not look the same as it did before. And I think a lot of that is, Rodney Terry. It's who's leading the team. I was very vocal a couple of weeks ago on the podcast about Rodney Terry needing to get a raise because he was doing an outstanding job. I said I don't know how they handle interim contracts, but this dude needs some more money. And it was interesting because literally the next day they offered him more. They gave him more money. And I said, here's some things I think Rodney Terry can do to be the head coach for Texas next year. He needs to win the Big 12 regular season. He needs to show well in the tournament. We all know the best team doesn't always win the conference tournaments. And then he needs a decently deep run, like, Sweet 16 type run into the NCAA tournament. And I think if he does that, and I said if he does all those things, it's going to be hard for Chris Del Conte to say, it's going to be hard for him to just completely eliminate him as a candidate if he does all those things. And right now, it looks like they might not do any of those things. So I think Rodney Terry's kind of coaching for his life as far as being at Texas next year. And what I'm seeing out of this team is they're just not consistently ready to play. And to me, that falls on the coach. The team is going to be what it is. The players are going to be what it is. And you could talk a bunch about whether they come out too amped up. I've mentioned that before. It just looks like for the first 10 minutes of every single game, they're just running around wild. Like they're not playing inside of themselves. They won't let the game come to them. It kind of reminds me of like the little league kid in baseball that, he's so excited to get up there and hit that he's just swinging at everything. He's not thinking anymore. He's just like, there's the pitch, I'm going to swing. And it's not even close, and obviously he's not going to make any contact. That's what I feel like I'm watching when I watch Texas for at least the first 10 minutes of most games, and in a lot of cases, like the whole first half. They just don't show up. And for me, as the coach, Rodney Terry has to be able to do something to figure that out. He knows those guys better than anybody, certainly better than me. He knows what makes them tick. He's got to find a way to get them to play within themselves and play within the game plan for the first half of game. If Texas would probably be damn near undefeated if it weren't for these long stretches in the first half where it's like they're not even playing. I thought they looked disinterested. I mean, if you look at this game as a game that it was, we got to go on the road and we got to play a pretty decent. They're not even pretty decent. They're a good team. They're healthy. They're a good team. They got some guys that can hurt you. And you're playing for a chance to win your conference. You can't show up and play the way they did. And again, to me, that all starts with the coach. So all's not lost. But Rodney Terry's going to have to make some changes, and this team is going to have to make some changes. And they got to do it fast because KU's coming on Saturday. And then we'll see what happens. If they get that win against KU, they might share the title. And then they got to go into the tournament. And again, I think they have to fare well. Like they can't be a one and done in the Big 12 tournament and still hold on to that 2 seed. So the big talk lately, if you follow me on TikTok at all, I made some I've been talking about this whole SEC move ever since the SEC move became official that it's going to be 2024. We've been talking about, what the matchups are going to look like, what the schedule is going to look like, how I was excited to, go into SEC country and see football games. And hopefully I'll be super rich by then and I can go watch a lot of these baseball games because I think there's a lot of really good baseball matchups in the 2024 and beyond SEC, Southeast Conference. I mean, it's going to be in the men's sports. It's going to be just a really cool conference to follow. Because of those conversations, you have your spinoff conversations, and one of the things I I saw was, Texas is going to go ruin another conference. And so I made some videos, talked about it a little bit in the podcast as well about, just how, Texas didn't ruin the Southwest Conference. Texas didn't ruin the Big 12, da-da-da-da-da. And I got a lot of feedback. I got a lot of, yeah, they did. It was the Longhorn Network, and Texas is too greedy, and Texas tried to strong arm the Big 12 and this, that, and they did the same thing to the Southwest Conference. And so, listen, I'm a reasonable person. When the Southwest Conference dissolved, I don't even think I was in high school yet. I certainly wasn't following, college sports the way I do today. When the Big 12 was formed, I was barely done with high school. So I'm open to the idea that maybe I don't know everything I think I know about the situation with Texas regarding the Southwest Conference and the Big 12. So I've spent the last few days doing a bunch of research on this. And so here it is. Southwest Conference, if you talk about, you talk to anybody about why the Southwest Conference died, and it's going to be Texas's fault, and it's going to be because Texas was greedy. And so I started looking into, really what happened, because I've always known, and I hope you know, Arkansas left the Southwest Conference way before the Southwest Conference dissolved. And so for me, I'm sitting there going, well, wait a second, Arkansas left the conference. Why is Texas getting all the blame? And Texas left the same time anybody else left. Why is Texas getting all this blame for the Southwest Conference folding up? And really, if you look at it, the Southwest Conference was always doomed, and it had nothing to do with any of the teams in the Southwest Conference necessarily, and everything to do with just the way college football and TV deal stuff was going at that time. When the Southwest Conference was formed, it's obviously a regional conference, right? And the entirety of it, outside of Arkansas, was in one state, the state of Texas. Well, what we started to see towards the end of the 80s and going into the 90s is these football conferences, TV for football was changing. It wasn't just regional anymore. Like, the TV network started to realize that there's people all over the country that want to watch Texas play, and there's people all over the country that want to watch Alabama play. And the conferences started to realize this. So the whole idea of having these little regional conferences anymore just didn't make any sense. The draw just wasn't there for networks to pay tons of money to have rights to broadcast. So what you saw was the Southwest Conference was a regional conference in a game, in a sport that was going national. So that's one reason. That's one issue for the Southwest Conference. Another one, and this one hardly ever gets talked about, the SMU scandal, when you think about where TV was going, was huge because they got the death penalty. And at the time, they were one of the biggest draws in the Southwest Conference. They were a football powerhouse, right? But they got the death penalty, which made the draw for the Southwest Conference from a TV perspective even worse than it already was for being a regional conference. Then Arkansas leaves, and they did it for more money, and they did it because it was a better fit. They were always kind of the outside looking in on the Southwest Conference deal. They were always the outsider. They're from Arkansas. Everybody else is from Texas. And although all these Texas teams hated each other, they're still all from Texas. And if you know anybody from Texas, you know Texas people generally are all about them some Texas. So Arkansas was kind of like this odd man out type. So for them, it made perfect sense. Let's get into the SEC. We'll make more money. The SEC at the time was about to step away from the College Football Association. And the reason, and that, for those of you that don't know, that was sort of the body that governed and brokered a lot of these TV deals with conferences. But the SEC is sitting there going, we can make more money than what these guys are getting us. We can do better on our own. So they invited Arkansas. Arkansas jumped ship, and that's fine. They did what was best for Arkansas. The interesting thing is A&M, all the way back then, was already having conversations with the SEC about joining the SEC because A&M folks felt like the SEC was a better cultural fit for them. In the end, there was a lot of sort of politicking going on that kept A&M and Texas together and brought along Texas Tech, brought along Baylor to form the Big 12 with the old Big 8. And at the time, for both of those conferences, the Big 8 and the Southwest Conference, it was absolutely the prudent move because now you went from this small regional conference to a wider, a more widely marketable conference. And so they formed the Big 12, and the Big 12 did really well initially. It was sort of dubbed the first super conference. And so that's what happened to the Southwest Conference. And if you listen to any of that, none of that has anything to do with Texas. It's just what was happening at the time with college football, with TV deals, with all that stuff. And unfortunately, with that move, you lost TCU, you lost Houston, you lost Rice. Collateral damage. I'm not saying it's right. You lost SMU. It's just what happened. At the time, there was nobody talking about 16-team conferences. In hindsight, maybe they should have formed a 16-team conference and been legit the first super conference. I don't know. Who knows what the Big 12 looks like at that point. But that's what happened with the Southwest Conference. Now on to the Big 12. Man, Texas, again, gets blamed for everything that's wrong with the Big 12. And if you talk to people, it's, oh, Texas tried to strong-arm the Big 12. And that's a really, to me, that's a very broad, doesn't really tell me shit type of a comment. It's very unspecific, non-specific. Not sure what the correct term is there, but it's not specific at all. Almost to the point where it's just made up. What does that even mean? Texas tried to strong-arm the Big 12. And then the other one, of course, is Longhorn Network. So let's kind of set the stage for how, when the Big 12 formed, how the TV deals worked. So there's Tier 1, there's Tier 2, and there's Tier 3 rights. The Tier 1 rights were purchased by ABC, meaning they can pick whatever games they want. Whether it's two Big 12 teams playing, whether it's a single Big 12 team playing, a team from another conference, ABC gets that pick. Then there's Fox for the Tier 2. And what that means for Fox is, hey, we're going to pay you this much money. Whatever's left over after ABC's done, we can pick, and we get to broadcast that. And then there's Tier 3. And this is the interesting part about the Big 12. And I got to be honest, I did not know this. The Big 12 is the only conference that allowed schools to market and monetize their own Tier 3 rights. So what that means is the conference isn't going to regulate what you do with your Tier 3 rights. You can do what you want with it. If you want to sell, if you want to sell a game on pay-per-view, you can do that. If you're playing, I don't know, Middle Tennessee State University of the Blind, and you feel like you can make money on it, and ABC and Fox are like, we don't give a damn about that because we don't think any of our listeners nationwide care about that. The Big 12 told every single school in the Big 12, you can go do what you want with that. And so this is important when you're talking about the Big 12 and the Longhorn Network and all of that stuff, because at the very beginning of the Big 12, there was talk amongst members of the Big 12 about forming a Big 12 network. And they were just talks. And those talks didn't lead to any sort of voting. So there was never anything officially voted upon by the Big 12. But there were conversations about, hey, let's start a Big 12 network. And this was before the SEC network, the Big 10 network, any of these other conference networks. The Big 12 had an opportunity to come together and build a network for their conference that would market all the teams' Tier 3 rights and broadcast all of those Tier 3 games. That they didn't want to do it. And there's probably reasons for that. I don't know. Maybe the next thing I research will be that specific topic, but it just never came to fruition. And then Texas started having the idea of, well, if the conference doesn't want to do it, how can we monetize our third tier? And so about 2007, they go to Texas A&M and say, hey, what do you guys think about starting like a Texas network, quote unquote? And I doubt it would have been called the Texas Network, but something along those lines, which was basically, hey, let's cooperate on this and let's build a network that broadcast all of our Tier 3 stuff, you and I, Texas and Texas A&M. And at the time, Texas A&M was not interested at all. In fact, they just shut it down, and it wasn't until 2010, as the Big 12 really started to fall apart and become unstable, that Texas A&M came back to Texas and said, hey, what do you think about, let's figure this out again? And by that point, Texas is not willing to have that conversation anymore. So again, this whole idea that Texas is strong-arming people and that the Longhorn Network was the reason for the Big 12 demise it's just inaccurate. Another thing I hear, and I think this is part of the strong arm argument, is the revenue share. So with those Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 rights, the conference also says, here's how this revenue sharing is going to break down. And keep in mind, this is all voted on by the members of the Big 12. So Tier 1 and Tier 2 are, the revenue from those tiers goes to all members of the Big 12. And then Tier 3 rights go to the team who's selling their rights to a network or to whoever. Generally going to be a network. Today it's absolutely a network. Back in the day it could have been, hey, we just want to do this as a pay-per-view thing and we don't want to make this like a contractual thing, but we'll broadcast your game for this much money. So from 1996 to 2011, 57% of Tier 1 and Tier 2 was allotted equally amongst all the Big 12 teams. And 43% was based off of who was actually on TV. What does that mean? So let's say we're in week 2 of college football season, and this is all hypothetical. Baylor is playing Georgia, and Texas Tech is playing, I don't know, Fresno State. Nobody's watching Texas Tech play Fresno State. It's not even getting on TV. People are going to watch Baylor and Georgia play just because it's Baylor and Georgia. That game is on TV. So Baylor would get money for that, obviously. So that's where that revenue share split and all that kind of shows itself, is by who's actually on TV. In 2011, that went from 57% shared equally to 76% shared equally, and only 24% based on who was actually on TV. The interesting thing about this is, to change the revenue share, which again, all these Big 12 teams voted on this when they joined the Big 12. All these things were decided. The narrative is that like there was this haul. So like the Big 12 said, hey, we're going to be the Big 12. Show up on Saturday and we're going to tell you what that means. And the narrative is that Texas walked into that hall and just said, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. You suck. We don't like you. You don't get shit. Da 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 da. When the reality is, when you signed the Big 12, when you signed to become part of the Big 12, you knew all these things were going to happen. You knew the revenue share at that time was going to be 50% allotted equally. 43% of it was going to go to the teams who were on TV. So 12 teams are fighting over 57%. And then the ones that are on TV, they're splitting that 43% equally. So you knew that. In 2011, that changes. We talked about that. Changing that arrangement required a unanimous vote amongst all Big 12 members. What I found, and this is super interesting, especially if you've heard the narrative over and over again about Texas greed and Texas strong-arming the rest of the Big 12 and Texas trying to lord over and take more than their fair share of the money. What's interesting is that prior to 2011, which was the year that Nebraska, Colorado, A&M, and Mizzou left for their new respective conferences, Nebraska and A&M refused every single time this came up to vote in favor of a change. So not Texas, Nebraska and A&M refused to vote for any changes in revenue share. Literally the year they left, the teams that were left in the Big 12 got richer. But it's all Texas's fault. Texas greed. Now let's move on to this realignment piece of it. So June 10th of 2010, Colorado says we're going to the Pac-10. And the reason we're going to the Pac-10 is because we feel like it's a better fit. Kind of the same deal that Arkansas left to the SEC for. For Colorado, it just made sense. They recruited on the West Coast. They were in a different time zone than most of the Big 12 teams. For them, they just felt like it made sense to move to a new conference. The very next day, Nebraska announces that they're moving to the Big 10. Now, keep in mind, at this time, there was all sorts of talk amongst Texas, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, and Oklahoma, as well as Colorado, about joining the Pac-10. And at this point, the Pac-10 is trying to do what the Big 12 didn't have the vision to do and build this 16-team super conference. Like, they are all about it. They didn't have a TV deal at the time. They're trying to draw in the best of the best they can get and just strike this huge TV deal. Nebraska knows this, and Nebraska is never involved in these Pac-10, Pac-16 talks. So obviously they're in the, this didn't just happen. Like, obviously Colorado had been talking with the Pac. The Pac had been loosely talking to other schools in the Big 12, the ones we mentioned about joining the Pac. Obviously, Nebraska knows this, so they're out talking to the Big 10. Literally the day after Colorado announces, Nebraska announces. That same day, there's reports that Texas, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, and Oklahoma are probably moving to the Pac to form this Pac-16 super conference, and also possibly A&M. However, at the time, it was reported that A&M was torn between moving to the Pac or moving to the SEC. And remember, A&M has been talking to the SEC since the Southwest Conference days about a possible move to the SEC. That's important. A few days later, on June 14th, all the Pac talk fell apart regarding Texas, Texas Tech, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, and Texas A&M. The reason it fell apart is because Texas said we don't want to go to the Pac, citing travel for the Olympic sports. The timing on this is interesting because what I was able to find is that, and I think you'll be able to draw this inference and understand what I'm saying. Larry Scott had already gone out and met with Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, and seemingly got their blessing. Yeah, yes, this is what we want to do. Texas was the last school he talked to, and Texas said they didn't want to do it. Again, citing travel for the Olympic sports. That's a lot of miles. So not only did Texas not leave the Big 12, they were the school out of all the ones that the Pac-12 was talking to that said they don't want to leave. Then, of course, August 31st, 2011, A&M announces that they're leaving for the SEC, citing the Longhorn Network, despite the fact that they had been talking to the SEC since the early 90s, despite the fact that the University of Texas approached them about trying to create a network between those two teams, despite the fact that their president said in 2010, before the Longhorn Network was ever even a thing, before it was ever even announced to be a thing, that they were contemplating a move to the SEC. And then Missouri announced, and I always forget Missouri. I don't know why. I'm not trying to forget Missouri. I just forget that they were a part of this whole deal. They announced on November 6, 2011, that they were moving to the SEC. So there's all your facts about what really happened. And those aren't opinions. That's like facts. You can go find them. And you can find like articles that are legit written that'll say all these same things. So so then you're kind of left. Then you're kind of left to try to figure out what all this means. And so here's my reality of how this went down. Well, actually, these are facts too. Texas wasn't the first school to leave the Southwest Conference or the Big 12. So to me, that makes this whole narrative that Texas is the reason pretty far-fetched. Another fact, the Southwest Conference was doomed. It didn't matter what anybody in the Southwest Conference did or did not do. The Southwest Conference was not set up to move forward with the direction that the business of college football was moving. All the conferences at that time were looking for better TV deals, and a regional conference inside of one state, not appealing to TV. The Pac-10 went after all these schools in the Big 12, not the other way around. Larry Scott went after, he said, I got to do this. I got to get some bigger teams in here. I need a big TV deal. This is how I do it. And he went after those teams. And again, Texas was the only school at a Tech, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State to tell him no. We're going to stay in the Big 12. Now, depending on which article you read, you're going to find inference that was all because of the Longhorn Network. Texas stayed in the Big 12 because the Big 12 was going to let them market those Tier 3 rights, and they make it seem like that was a special thing for Texas when it absolutely was not. Any other team in the Big 12 could have started their own network and showed all their games the way the Longhorn Network shows all the Texas games. But let's just say it was special treatment for Texas to try to keep the Big 12 together, which it absolutely, again, was not. The Longhorn Network wasn't a factor for Colorado or Nebraska. They left well before there was ever a Longhorn Network. They left before there was ever talk of a Longhorn Network, serious talk of a Longhorn Network. Again, we talked about it. A&M explicitly refused to partner with Texas on a quote-unquote Texas network. And again, even if all of those things weren't true, was the expectation of the other teams in the Big 12 of Texas that ESPN coming to them and saying, hey, Texas, we're going to offer you a shitload of money because we know people all over the country are going to watch it. Here's $300 million. Is the expectation of the Big 12 that seriously that Texas goes, no, we're not going to do that? Despite all of this greed from Texas, they never once voted against a more equitable revenue share in the Big 12. Nebraska and Texas A&M did, though. And Nebraska and Texas A&M were two of the four schools that left the Big 12 within a year period. Now, when you start thinking about, so again, there's facts. So now let's start talking about like what people's perceptions are. Maybe Texas Tech and Oklahoma State were pissed at Texas for ruining the Pac-16. Maybe Texas Tech and Oklahoma State were really excited about that move. And if that's the case, then they have every right to be somewhat pissed off at Texas because Texas said no. But you can't be pissed at Texas for ruining the Big 12 because the Big 12 still exists, and Texas did absolutely nothing to push out the teams that are gone. Essentially, you can't be mad at Texas because you can't make your own way. As soon as Texas told the Pac-10 commissioner, president, whatever he's called, we're not coming, they didn't go to Tech and Oklahoma State and say, hey, we still want you. They went and got Utah. I wonder why they didn't do that. Because Texas Tech and Oklahoma State, and I'm not trying to be arrogant. These are just facts. They're not the same draw as Oklahoma and Texas. You can't be pissed at Texas and Oklahoma because you're not Texas and Oklahoma. And that's the type of energy we get. So those are all the facts. Now we're only left to speculate on why Colorado, Nebraska, Missouri, and A&M really made the moves they made. But what you can't say is that it was Texas greed or Texas strong-arming the rest of the Big 12 because the facts don't support that narrative at all. Here's what I think, and this is all my opinion. Colorado and Nebraska, who were the first teams to leave the Big 12, they were pretty much running shit in the Big 8. And once the Big 12 formed, for whatever reason, they weren't doing that anymore. And I'm talking about on the field. Like they were not successful in the Big 12. Not nearly as successful as they were in the Big 8. The first Big 12 championship game ever played, Texas upsets Nebraska. And that Nebraska team was a really, really good Nebraska team. And from then on, Texas pretty much, I don't like to use the word own because I think it's stupid, but to put it in the vernacular that all the people listening to this and all the people on TikTok are going to hear the stuff that's the way they're going to look at it is Texas owned Nebraska for the entirety of the Big 12. Kind of in the same way Kansas State has really owned Texas for the entirety of the Big 12. I don't know what it is. Texas just can't beat Kansas State. And even back then, at the inception of the Big 12, Nebraska, as good as they were on a national level, they could not beat Texas. And Colorado couldn't either. And I think that coupled with, and this was for Nebraska, the partial qualifier thing, and again, this wasn't a Texas thing. The Big 12 voted against partial qualifiers 11-1. Guess who was the one that voted for it? Nebraska, the one that was the great benefactor from being able to bring partial qualifiers in and play. Everybody else in the Big 12 said, no, forget that shit. So here you are as Nebraska, and you can't beat Texas. You can't do what you used to do with partial qualifiers. They couldn't win, and so they said, we got to go somewhere else. And, yeah, there was more money. Colorado probably made that jump for cultural reasons and because the money was going to be better, and they didn't have to, listen to Texas, and they didn't have to listen to Oklahoma, and they didn't have to some extent, listen to Texas A&M. They just didn't have to do that shit anymore. Same thing with Nebraska. They were going to go to the big, make more money. And I really think both of those schools made the best decision for them. I think they said this is the best thing we can do for our athletic programs. Fine. Go on and do it. Missouri, I don't know what the deal with Missouri is. I don't know much about the University of Missouri or Missouri University or whatever the hell they are. I don't know much about their culture or anything like that. What I do know is they weren't wildly successful in the Big 12. A&M is perfectly clear. A&M, I don't think there's probably a more bitter rivalry on the face of the planet than there is between Texas and Texas A&M. They hate Texas with a passion, and Texas fans do not like Texas A&M fans. And again, the same thing. Texas A&M could not beat Texas, and they could not be successful in the Big 12. So it's real simple to just say, yeah, Texas is greedy, and they're trying to strong arm and run everybody in the Big 12. But we already talked about it. The facts don't support that at all. In fact, Nebraska was greedy. In fact, A&M was greedy. In fact, Texas did not leave the Southwest Conference, did not leave the Big 12 Conference first. In fact, Texas, during massive expansion efforts by the Pac, said, no, we're going to stay here in the Big 12. So that's really what happened with the Southwest Conference, and that's really what happened to the Big 12. And by the way, hello, the Big 12 is still there. Texas didn't ruin it. It's still there. It's got 12 teams. 14 for next year. Those teams are going to make more money because they just signed a bigger TV deal. Part of the reason they were able to sell a bigger TV deal because of Texas and Oklahoma, who are now leaving to go to the SEC. Some of the other nonsense I got is Texas just needs to go independent. Why didn't y'all just go independent if y'all don't want to share money? And again, Texas wasn't the one voting against a better revenue share. What Texas did want to do is keep the money that they earned by being on TV in that tier 3 zone. Maybe that pissed everybody off. But again, you can't be mad at somebody because you can't be somebody. I don't hate Jeff Bezos because I'm not a billionaire. It's not Jeff Bezos' responsibility to make sure I'm a billionaire. The reason Texas doesn't go independent is because it doesn't make any sense. The power is together. The power is a conference. It's easier to do everything you want to do. Make money, make it to the playoff, make it to, be successful, all that stuff. It's easier to do all those things if you're in a conference. And if Texas really was greedy and really was interested in not playing nice with others, they wouldn't be in a conference anymore because they could go independent and they could go make money. Which, again, is just further proof that all the bullshit you hear about Texas ruining this and ruining that and not playing nice and not doing that, it's all bullshit. And it is all petty. I'm not you. You have this, and I'm angry because you have that and I don't. And it's all coming from this place of, you should help me have that because I can't go get it on my own. Another comment I got, well, now they're going to be in the SEC sharing revenue. You are absolutely correct. They will be in the SEC sharing revenue. And again, sharing isn't the problem. The share is bigger in the SEC for Texas than any share they would have got in the Big 12. 12 of the top 25 most valuable athletic departments in the United States are in the future SEC. So 12 of the 16 teams that will be in the SEC are in the top 25 most valuable athletic departments. That's why Texas is going to the SEC. That's why Oklahoma is going to the SEC. The future Big 12, conversely, has 0 teams, athletic departments in the top 25. And I wish I could have found, I really wish I could have found, and I'll probably still try to find it, but I couldn't find it ahead of this podcast. I wish I could have found like a list 1 through 131 of D1 major football athletic departments rankings. Because I bet you the Big 12 isn't very good at all. The future Big 12. The other thing is, and this is part of the Big 12's problem, and it has been part of the Big 12's problem since the inception of the Big 12, the leadership was not good in the Big 12. The Big 12, when it got formed and they started having some really early and quick, like no shit, good success. Most people don't remember this because the SEC's kind of been running college sports for so long. That used to be the Big 12. It was a much shorter spurt, but this dominance on the athletic gridiron, that was the Big 12 when the Big 12 came together. And they kind of set back on that, and they never wanted to do anything different. They never wanted to continue to improve. There's a saying in business, if you're not getting better, you're dying. That's what the Big 12, that was like the attitude of the Big 12 from the very, very beginning. Whereas the SEC, they're constantly making moves. They invited Missouri. They invited A&M. They invited Texas. They invited Oklahoma. They're the leaders of most of the college football playoff expansion talk. They were leaders in the college football playoff talk to begin with. The Big 12 just, no, where's the Big 12? Oh, well, we'll be the Big 12, but we'll have 10 teams. That's the Big 12 leadership. Talk a little bit about these new rules to speed up games. You got baseball with a pitch clock and a batter clock. You got football with all these new running clock rules that they're talking about. Please stop fucking with sports games. If you don't want to watch baseball because it's too slow for you, quit fucking watching baseball. Go do something else. If 3.5 hours is too long for you to watch a football game, stop watching it at 3 hours. Why would anybody want to shorten a football game? Saturdays are like the greatest day. Saturdays in the fall are the absolute greatest days of the year. Why? Because I can wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning, start watching football, and watch football till freaking midnight. I don't give a shit how long the games are. You want to make the game slower or shorter? Stop showing 9,000 fucking commercials during every game. Stop having a commercial between a scoring play and the kickoff, and then go into a commercial after the kickoff. Stop having the little dude with the big orange fucking glove. And if you've ever been to a live college football game, it's probably like this in NFL as well. There's an official, and he's wearing like the normal official gear, except he's got a giant fucking orange glove on his hand. And he stands out on the field and holds time for these fucking commercials. Get rid of that guy. You want to fix college football? Get rid of that dude. Get his ass off the field. Baseball pitch clock. I don't know how it is in MLB because we're just in spring training, but I've seen this be a factor in college baseball games already this year. The pitcher has 20 seconds from the time he puts his foot on the rubber to throw over to another base or throw to the plate. And by the way, he can only fake throw to another base one time during an at bat. So if he's already done it once, he can't do it again without a ball going towards the hitter's count. The hitter, if he's responsible for holding up the 20-second clock, then gets a strike. A University of Texas baseball player got struck out on a no pitch in a game earlier this year. Again, you want to speed up baseball? Get rid of all the commercials. Some of the commercials. You don't have to get rid of all of them. Just get rid of some of them. And again, why in the hell would you want to speed up baseball? There is nothing better, and this is just my opinion. To me, there's nothing better than a really nice afternoon, 75 degrees, the breeze is blowing, blue sky, the birds are chirping, and you're sprawled out watching a baseball game all afternoon. Make it 5 hours. Why in the hell would you want to not be longer at a baseball game or not be longer at a football game? And the real interesting thing is they keep saying stupid shit like, oh, we're thinking about the safety of the players and it's too much time and da-da-da. And, you know, we can knock off 7 plays off a game if we just do this. And we could knock off 20 plays. It's too many plays. We're asking these guys to play too many plays. And it's dangerous. And we need to protect them. Except, hey, we're going to expand to a 12-game playoff. Or 12-team playoff. Used to, you played in college football 10 games, 11 games tops. Starting in 2024, you might play 15 or 16 games. If you play in the national championship. But they're going to fuck the game up such that it's faster. So that's going to keep you safe. That's going to keep you from getting tired. Those few plays they save by running the clock the whole fucking game, by running the clock on a throwaway, all these stupid clock rules. Man, stop fucking with sports. Please stop trying to change sports. If you want to make a different game, go make a different game. Leave my game alone. Leave baseball alone. Leave football alone. Let's just go play. What do you guys think? Am I crazy? I don't think I'm crazy. Subscribe to the podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Click the little bell to give you notifications. By the way, subscribing to either one of those things doesn't cost you guys anything. But subscribing might help me be able to produce some better content. Give you guys something unique to look at, listen to. Find me on TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, at Horn Takes. You guys can email me at horntakespodcast@gmail.com with all your comments, questions, concerns, and criticisms. I love them all. Hook 'em.